Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is Discerning What is True. Today is the 12th day of March 2023, and my title of my talk tonight is Woe Unto You Lawyers, Chapter 6. This is a book that was written by Fred Rodell back in the 1939 when the court system, that is Roosevelt was packing the courts, that is he was trying to overturn all the decisions and trying to make this country more socialistic. And he did a good job at that, to be honest with you. He never got to pack the court, but he tried very often, very hard. He was a ruthless leader, too. He acted as though he was benevolent, but it was always to benefit them. So let's get into the book here. Chapter 6 is The Law and the Lady. Here's a quote from Henry Adams. Women have, and commonly, a very positive moral sense. That which they will is right, that which they reject is wrong. And very straightforward. The lawyers have made such a complicated mess out of the word game they call legal reasoning than any effort to dissect even a tiny part of that reasoning and show it up for the fake that it is. Inevitably makes tough going. In a sense, that fact has been the intelligent magnanimity line of the law. Plenty of people have long suspected that the lawyers, with their long words, were indulging. You see, hold on just one quick way. Reasoning and showing it up for fake that it is, inevitably makes tough going. In a sense, that fact has been the intelligent magnanimity line of the law. Plenty of people have long suspected that the lawyers, with their long words, were indulging in nothing more nor less than wholesome flim-flam. But when it comes down to trying to take the flim-flam with all its myriad trappings apart, people just can't be bothered. And even a personal conducted tour through the mirror maze of legal logic becomes tiring and confusing. It may, however, be possible to indicate something of the futility and irrelevance of legal processes merely by imaginary application of the legal way of sending problems to a field in which decisions are customarily made in a more direct and efficient manner. Suppose, just for instance, that is, a housewife, by repute one of the more practical species of human being, were to run her affairs for a day according to the legal patterns of principles and counter-principles and concepts. Suppose, you see, in the first place, she would of course be guided from afar by a dim and conveniently ambiguous idea of personal justice. She would be bothered about doing the right thing, making the right decision, but since she would be her own Supreme Court, anything she did would be right after she did it. The difficulty would lie in deciding beforehand what to do and what not to do in accordance with the exorbitant rules of her personal law. That law would have two primary principles. The first would be that anything which seems presently desirable is right. The second would be that anything that seems presently desirable is likely in the long run to be wrong. Of course, the two principles might occasionally seem to conflict in their application to a specific fact situation, but that would be of minor importance since both in the abstract would be entirely valid legal principles. Each that is, moreover, would be buttressed with such principles and sub-principles which might come in handy in making certain sort of decisions. The lady's days begin. Her first decision, obviously, is whether to get up or lie in bed for a little longer. She remembers that the law is that anything which seems presently desirable is right, and certainly lying in bed seems presently very desirable. Yet before rushing to a snap judgment, she must dispose of the principle which holds that anything which seems presently desirable is likely, in the long run, to be wrong. That principle, of course, has certain exceptions and qualifications. One is to the effect that any action or any action which seems presently so desirable that a failure to indulge the desire may affect the disposition over a period of hours will, in such circumstances, be the right action or inaction, at least if that period of hours is taken as controlling for the future. Clearly, that exception now applies. Yet in all fairness, the lady must admit that there is a exception to the desirable equals that's right rule to the effect that the denial of whatever seems desirable may, by imparting a sense of nobility, becomes desirable in its own right and therefore proper. There seems to be a deadlock. It will be a close decision, you see. Perhaps proceeded with help. Yesterday, the lady arose immediately, but yesterday's decision is not necessarily controlling because yesterday's the sun was shining. Today it is an ugly day. Such a disparity in the relevant facts cannot fairly be ignored. The problem remains unsettled. Then the lady remembers that she has an appointment with her hairdresser that morning. Manifestly, this brings into play the well-recognized legal rule, a sub-principle, desirable equal rights principle, that appointments voluntarily made and which time is of importance must be kept on time. The sub-principle that appointments voluntarily made in base haste and later regretted need not be kept on time, and the sub-principle that appointments involuntarily may need not be kept at all are both obstacles besides the point here. The law finally tracked to earth seems to decree that the lady must rise. And so she gets up, not of course because she wants to get up or to keep an appointment with her hairdresser. Rather, because all the relevant legal principles point to such a decision. Anything which seems presently desirable is right, and she wants to get her hair done, you see. Anything which seems presently desirable is likely in the long run to be wrong, and she would still like to lie in bed a little longer. Anything so desirable that a failure to indulge the desire will affect the disposition is right, in at least a limited sense. And if she doesn't get her hair done today, she'll go mad. The denial of what seems desirable can impart a sense of nobility, which makes the denial proper, and she will indeed feel noble if she gets right up. Appointments must be kept on time if you want to keep them on time, you see. And the lady is afraid her hairdresser would be unable to fit her in later. Moreover, yesterday's precedent, although not here controlling, points suggestively to the same direction. There is thus no doubt at all about the law of the case, and the decision automatically follows the law. The lady's next two problems are comparatively easy. Their answers dictate by long lines of solid precedents. Should she bother to brush her teeth? Yes, because she has always interpreted her law that way, under the general principle that whatever is said to be good for the health is right. Should she turn her hot shower cold before she gets out? No, because she has always interpreted her law that way, under the general principle that whatever is said to be good for the health is likely to be undesirable, and therefore, by simple legal logic, wrong. The choice of a dress to wear downtown, a choice which narrows down to a practical black number, 2 months old, and brand new blue and white print, brings other legal concepts into the picture. There is the concept of economy embodied in the principle that what is economical is right, and also in the sub-principle that what is economical in the short run is probably extravagant in the long run. And this concept seems to favor the black dress, which will not get dirty so easily. But the concept of smartness, a typical legal concept, in that it is contents and meaning are constantly changing from time to time, and from place to place, seems to favor the blue and white dress. The lady's decision in this matter is judicial in the extreme. She bows to the paramount principle that in questions of dress, whatever is smart is right, recognizing as she does so that this is one of her few rules of law to which there is almost no exception. The only legal question which ever arises concerning it being what is smart. But in defense or deference to the principle of economy, she determines to keep her dress clean by riding downtown in a taxi instead of on a streetcar. In this reconciling a conflict between two apparently irreconcilable principles, the lady has displayed her mastery of the legal process. Once in downtown, the lady is aware that she has entered a different legal jurisdiction. The same general principles are in the main still good law, but their interpretations tend to vary. For instance, what seems presently desirable is still right, and what seems presently desirable is still likely, in the long run, to be wrong. Yet the question as to what is presently desirable involves a greater emphasis on the rule that what other people believe to be proper is desirable, and correspondingly less insistence on the home rule that what other people believe to be proper is usually undesirable. Thus, the lady, after careful consideration of the question whether to give her hairdresser a generous tip or a merely adequate tip, finds a solution to the principle that what other people believe to be proper is desirable, especially when outside the home jurisdiction. Narrowing down this principle so that people means person and person refers to the hairdresser, a simple legal deduction, she leaves a generous tip. This ruling is also in strict conformity with the abstract legal idea of economy, which, when considered in the light of the well-recognized legal tenet that what is economic in the short run is probably extravagant in the long run. Clearly, a hairdresser might do a careless job on her next time if she left a stingy tip. At lunch, the lady is confronted with a problem whether in order to refrain from ordering a rich pastry dessert. Hence, the primary principle concerning desirability and the secondary principle concerning what is said to be healthy appears to be both congruent and conflicting, but only on the surface, of course. Reaching into the recesses of her legal system, the lady recalls that there is a pertinent and useful corollary to the sub-principle that denial of whatever seems desirable may, by imparting a sense of nobility, becomes desirable and therefore right. The corollary is to the effect that whatever seems desirable but not too desirable may be denied with greater impunity than whatever seems extremely desirable, since the sense of nobility imparted by the denial depends on the denial itself and not on the degree of desirability of that which is desired. Accordingly, the lady passes up the cream puff. You see. The lady's luncheon companion is going shopping. Will the lady come along? Decisions, of course, must be dictated not by whim but by law. It is the law that is to waste time is wrong. It is further the law that to devote oneself to trivial matters when important matters demand attention is to waste time, and various household chores await the lady at home. Yet it is accepted rule that outside the home jurisdiction, household chores takes on the color of triviality. The exception to this rule that household chores assume extreme importance, especially outside the home jurisdiction, in the face of an unwanted invitation, is clearly inapplicable here. Furthermore, there exists a equity principle, frequently succeeding the more rigid rules of law, that accommodation to the requests of others may be proper per se, that per se settles it. In the course of the shopping, the lady sees a hat. She does not need the hat, but she likes it and wants to own it. Decisions here is extravagant and simple, in line with basic legal principles. The obvious relevant principle has the sanctity of constitutional doctrine and involves one of the most sacred of civil liberties. For freedom of contract may not under any circumstance nor under any guise of pseudo-legality be denied. All the precedents and the entire history of her personal law points unswervingly to the conclusion that failure to purchase a becoming hat amounts to no less than an infringement of contract. The decree in the case is therefore automatic. And so it goes. Throughout the day, the lady's problems, major and minor, are subject to a system of abstract and solemn sounding principles, which for her make up the law. Decision in each case is made in strict accordance with those principles. In fact, the principles dictate the proper answers. Finally, after dinner, the question arises whether the lady and her husband should go to the movies or should instead stay home and listen to the radio and go to bed early. She wants to go to the movies. Her husband wants to stay at home. But clearly, her husband's decision is not and should not be controlling. Like the decree of a lower court, it must be given due weight, yet the whole problem must be carefully examined ab initio in order to ensure that the final decision be rendered in accordance with the law. She remembers that the law is that anything which seems presently desirable is right, and certainly going to the movies seems presently very desirable. Yet, before rushing to a snap judgment, she must dispose of the principle which holds that anything which seems presently desirable is likely in the long run to be wrong. That principle, of course, has certain exceptions and qualifications. One is to the effect that any action or inaction which seems presently so desirable that a failure to indulge desire may affect the disposition over a period of hours will, in such circumstances, be the right action or inaction, at least in that period of hours if taken as controlling for the future. Clearly, that exception now applies. Yet, in all fairness, the lady must admit that there is an exception of desirable equal rights rule, to the effect that the denial of whatever seems desirable may, by imparting a sense of nobility, becomes desirable in its own right and therefore proper. There seems to be a deadlock. It will be a close decision. Perhaps President will help. Last night, the lady and her husband went to the movies, but last night's decision is not necessarily controlling because last night it was Gary Cooper. Tonight is some foreign film. Such a disparity in the relevant facts cannot fairly be ignored. The problem remains unsettled. Then the lady realizes that she is quite tired and has a busy day ahead of her tomorrow. Manifestly, this brings into play the well-recognized legal rule as such principle, a desirable, probably wrong in the long run principle, that it is safer even at some inconvenience to look one best at a tea party. Various sub-principles and exceptions and qualifications concerning the amount of the inconvenience which the rule would tolerate are obviously beside the point here. The law, finally tracked to earth, seems to read that the lady and her husband must stay home. And so they stay home. Not, of course, because the lady wants to look well at her tea party tomorrow, rather because all the relevant legal principles point to such a decision. Anything which seems presently desirable is right, and she wants to get enough sleep. Anything which seems presently desirable is likely in the long run to be wrong, and she would still rather like to go to the movie. Anything so desirable that a failure to indulge the desire will affect the disposition is right, in at the least a limited sense. And if she doesn't look well tomorrow, she'll never forgive herself. Denial of what seems desirable can impart a sense of nobility which makes the denial proper. And she will indeed feel noble if she accedes to her husband's wish to stay home. It is safer to look one's best at tea parties, and the lady is afraid it might be unpleasant to flout this principle. Moreover, last night's proceeding, although apparently pointing to the opposite direction, is clearly distinguishable. There is thus no doubt at all about the law of the case. A decision automatically follows the law. Now, this resume of a lady's day in which all decisions are directed by abstract principles or rules of law may sound absurd in the extreme. It is plain that most of the principles are couched in such vague general language that they cannot possibly be guides to a specific decision or specific matter. It is plain that practically every principle can be counted with another principle of exception which contradicts in whole or in part the first principle. It is plain that not one of the lady's decisions necessarily follows from the principles or concepts which is said to dictate them. It is plain that in every instance the controlling principle or principles resembles nothing so much as a loose rationalization of what she is going to do, applied after the actual decision is made. Furthermore, it is plain that if someone else says the lady's husband has been acting as a Supreme Court for her, many of the rulings would have gone the other way, even though the same set of guiding principles had been rigidly adhered to. In any conflict between the concepts of smartness and economy, for instance, the decision might have favored economy and yet done the proper obediency to smartness under the rule that if it's smart, be economical. Freedom of contract might well have been interpreted as freedom to refuse to buy a hat, no matter how becoming. Despite its limited scope, the lady's legal system, would hardly have needed stretching to do double duty all the way down the line. Absurd indeed, but not one iota more absurd than the system of law under which we actually live. Most legal principles, too, are couched in such vague, general languages that they cannot possibly be guides to a specific decision on specific matters. Practically every legal principle, too, can be counted with another principle or exception which contradicts its whole or in part the first principle. Scarcely ever does a court decision necessarily follow from the principle or concept which is said to dictate it. And in just about every instance, the controlling principle or principles resemble nothing so much as a loose rationalization of what a court orders done, apply after the actual decision is made. If the lady's legal system and the way that system had worked for her seem more patiently ridiculous than the working of the law, it is only because most of the principles of the law are phrased in a unfamiliar and therefore impressive language, so that their vagueness, their contradictions, their frequent and obvious use merely to justify desired results, are concealed from the non-lawyer, untrained eye. Substitute within the legislative intent for desirable, substitute executable, contract contemplating adequate consideration for appointment with the hairdresser, and the lady's legal principles began to take on a fake dignity, an air of solemnity and importance. This dignity, moreover, has no relation at all to the meaning or lack of meaning or the words used. Or going at it from the opposite angle will take the well-boasted legal principle that state regulation of private enterprises amounts to deprivation of property without due process of law, unless sanctioned as a proper exercise of the state police power. Substitute for it that the simple and equally enlightened statement that certain state laws are bad unless they are good, and the law begins to sound as silly as the lady. As a matter of fact, the law and those who lay it down are often considerably sillier than the lady. For the lady, it was perfectly apparent, knew what she wanted, and decided accordingly, unbothered by the requirements that she justify each of her decision with a broad generalization of principle. That requirement was easily satisfied because all decisions she was called on to make affected her, the judge directly and immediately. And because the business of fitting a principle to a ready-made decision was, as it always is in law and elsewhere, a simple matter. But the judges who make legal decisions frequently have not the slightest interest in the outcome of the case they are deciding. Of course, if they had such an interest, and even the judges are not immune from political and social emotions, they like or hate the New Deal, they approve or disapprove of labor unions, they trust or mistrust big businesses, then they can and often do consciously or unconsciously revert to the legal procedure of the lady. They judge first and justify afterwards. And in so doing, they are acting, if not in the judicial, at least in a practical matter. In brackets here, being practical and being judicial in the cold legal sense are just about mutually exclusive anyway. In run-of-the-mind cases, however, the sort that makes us much of the business of the law, the judges don't care who wins nor what this eventual decision will be. The lawyers in the case always care. They know beforehand what decisions they want, and so they. In the practical matter, the lady can't fit their generalizations. Their legal pleading to desire a result. Not so the judges. How then do the judges ever achieve an answer? What the judges do actually is what the lady pretended to do, and for that matter, what the judges themselves pretend to do when the answer is of any concern to them. They balance, don't laugh, one set of abstract principles against another, and through some sort of trance-like transference, come out with a specific decision. They take the long words and synonymous phrases of the law, no matter how ambiguously or empty of meaning, no matter how contradictory of each other, they weigh these words and phrases in a vacuum, which is the only way they could be weighed, and then they apply the weightier to the dispute in question with all the finality that might be according to a straight wire from God. It is as though a court were to have considered with complete disinterest the case of our friend. The lady were to have balanced against each other the principles put forth by opposing counsel to the effect that what is desirable is right and what is desirable is wrong, were to have decided in the abstract, of course, that what is desirable is wrong was the most compelling of the two, and were then to have informed the lady that since it is the law that what is desirable is wrong, therefore the lady must get out of bed. Certainly, time and time again, as actual law cases, opposing counsel will put forth as the basis of their argument legal principles which are respectfully and yet are directly contradictory. Adequately will act when there is no adequate remedy at law, and equity need not act even though there is no adequate remedy at law. Peaceful picketing is legal, and all picketing is illegal. Contributory negligence on the part of the plaintiff absolves the defendant of responsibility, and contributory negligence on the part of the plaintiff does not absolve the defendant of all responsibility. And time again, a court will grab one of the two contradictory principles and with some slight elaboration use it to the basis of the decision. For it is the legend of the law that every legal dispute can and must be settled by hauling an abstract principle down to earth and pinning it to the dispute in question. The last thing any court will ever admit, even when it is being quite practical about what it decides, is that practical considerations have anything to do with the decision. To admit this would be to admit that it was not the law that piled of symbolical abstractions they dictated the answer. Then, too, as judges are doubtless smart enough to realize a man or a lady would scarcely need to be learned in the law in order to sit and hand down practical answers to what are, in the last analysis, no more than practical problems. Okay, that is the conclusion of chapter 6 tonight. Thank you for being here. Just sharing a little bit of information here from this particular book. Again, Woe Unto You Lawyers, chapter 6, by Mr. Rodell, Fred Rodell, that is. Again, it's important for you to understand what he's trying to point out here. And he's also explaining simply what the judges do. They a lot of times simply don't have any care about what's going on. The only reason why lawyers are involved in it, I don't think he understands what I see. I'm just going to say this. Fred Rodell sees this whole idea, as far as I can see, simply as a defense lawyer and a prosecutor. As though there's, and what's happened simply is he's looking at the good of the court. Our court system has gotten so bad, folks, that all of the people that are within the court, the four people, the court recorder, the prosecutor, defense, and the judge, are making money on the guilty plea. If they don't get a guilty plea, none of them really make any money. You see? Do you follow? That's why there's less and less what we call innocence. There's always something and actually to get someone in trouble. And this is what's really what you have to understand. It's about money, and they've corrupted the system. And what he's trying to say simply is that with Mr. Oliver Wendell Holmes, he said he's brought in a mumble jumble thing here because it is not looking at the Constitution. It's presuming what it's saying instead of what it is actually saying. And that's the detrimental part. You're coming in with a presupposition, which I just said earlier, the one before this, the chapter I was reading, is you're coming in with a presupposition of what you want to say, what you want to happen in a court, or whatever decision you're going to do in a Supreme Court decision. And what happens simply is you're not being fair because you're coming in with a presupposition. You're presupposing what you want to take place. And that's not fair. That's not treating people being who are innocent, and treating guilty people as being guilty. And the problem is simply is that they're coming in with a presupposition, and it's wrong. And it's the same thing with religion. You presuppose that there is a God, or you presuppose there isn't a God. Well, you have to prove that, you see. But in reality, simply is a belief system is different than a law. I believe this is such and such, or this is what I believe, such and such. I believe there's a God out there, or such and such. And I don't like the word God. I'd rather use the word creator or source or whatever, because it's God comes in what I would call in a perspective that is that he deserves worship, and he expects others to worship him. You see, I have a really strong thing. And wait a minute, no. This is not right. That's a belief system. And most people do certain things in order to benefit. They don't do it because it's actually the right thing to do. And that's, again, a belief system, you see. So anyway, it's getting late, so I just wanted to share this information with you guys tonight. I wish you a good night and a good day at work or good morning. And you take care, and thank you for listening. Okay?